Texts and translations are also part of the liturgy. The purpose of translation into the vernacular languages is to enable the congregation's full, conscious and active participation, as the Council said. Good translations are translations that evoke a sense of it being God whom we address, and therefore have a dignified language, but without seeming to separate God from ordinary human life. And they are translations that are faithful to the meaning of the original text, and they are translations that respect the people who are using them. It is on this last point that our present translations fall short, because although the words are in English, the syntax is often still in Latin. This happened because the Congregation for Divine Worship and Sacraments wanted an English translation to correspond word for word, phrase for phrase, dictionary-like, to the Latin. That restraint was neither theologically required nor linguistically defensible. Translation is essentially an act of communication. If it doesn't communicate, then it hasn't translated, carried across the meaning of the original text. Pope Francis' motu proprio on this matter allows translations to more fully respect the idioms and the syntax of the receiving language, and instructs the Congregation for Divine Worship and Sacraments not to impose its will as it had done previously. It should be noted that when the work of translating and approving translations has been done, there's still the role of the presiding priest. It's his responsibility to ensure that the prayers of the Missal can become the prayers of the people present. The work done by the translators does not excuse him from carrying out his role, which can sometimes require the small adaptations that more effectively communicate the meaning of the prayers to a particular congregation. In response to a query about whether a local bishop or a bishop's conference, for the sake of uniformity, could impose one option where the liturgy itself allows several options, the Concilium for the Implementation of the Liturgy back in 1965 replied as follows. It said, yes, strictly speaking you can, but always to be kept in mind is the preservation of that freedom envisaged by the new rubrics to adapt the celebration in an intelligent way to the particular church, to the assembly of the faithful, in such a way that the universal right of the church is a living reality for this gathering of people. That's the mind of the church. Akin to the matter of translation is inculturation. Pope John Paul II described inculturation as the incarnation of the gospel in autonomous cultures, and at the same time the introduction of those cultures into the life of the church, unquote. That's from his letter on the apostles to the Slavic peoples. In other words, he uses the term incarnation, which means something more than mere adaptation, although he himself and other Roman documents continue to use the word adaptation. Pope Paul VI had used a musical metaphor when he described evangelization as a transposition of the gospel in the field of liturgical expression, in the areas of catechesis, and the way we formulate our theology, and in secondary church structures and ministries, unquote. That's from his letter on evangelization. We're a long way short of that kind of transposing of the gospel into the cultures of the world. For years in our country, the church provided a separate Maori mission, which ran in parallel with the parishes. An unfortunate side effect was that we didn't feel any need for enculturation in our parishes or our liturgies. As a result, it's difficult, even today, for many practicing Catholic Maori to feel truly at home in most of our Sunday congregations and parish activities. For them, it can feel like being at someone else's place. We need to take seriously Pope John Paul II's words to the churches of Oceania, and I quote, "Adequate translations of liturgical texts and appropriate use of symbols drawn from local cultures can avert the cultural alienation of Indigenous peoples when they approach the Church's worship. The words and signs of the liturgy will be the words and signs of their soul." Unquote. Fortunately, many of our parishes now at least open the Mass with the sign of the cross in Maori, and in the Mass with the blessing in Maori, and provide for Maori art in our churches. And some parishes go further by celebrating even a scheduled parish Mass in Te Reo at least once a month.